Hinterkaifeck was no ordinary farm. It was a place that seemed to exist outside of time, a world unto itself. It stood alone, isolated, far from prying eyes. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the silence was almost deafening.
The Gruber family called it home. Andreas and Cäzilia, our widowed daughter Viktoria. We were a family bound by blood and circumstance, and her two children, Cäzilia and Josef. The children brought a semblance of joy to the otherwise somber household.
We lived a quiet life, tending to our crops, caring for our animals. The routine was comforting, a way to keep the outside world at bay.
Little did they know their peaceful existence was about to be shattered. An unseen force was creeping into their lives. The farm sat on the edge of a forest. Dense trees surrounded it. The forest was both a protector and a prison. Shadows lurked at every corner. The darkness seemed to have a life of its own, whispering secrets that no one could hear.
It was the kind of place where secrets could hide, where the land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, where whispers could be lost in the wind. The isolation was both a blessing and a curse, a double-edged sword.
The Grubers kept to themselves. Their interactions with the outside world were minimal, almost non-existent. They rarely ventured into town. When they did, it was only for necessities, and they spoke little of their lives. Their solitude was both a comfort and a curse. It provided safety, but also bred suspicion and unease. In the spring of 1922, tension hung in the air. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken fears. Something wasn't right at Hinterkaifeck. The family felt it. An invisible weight pressed down on them, but they couldn't name it, couldn't pin it down. It was like a shadow that moved just out of sight.
We tried to ignore it, to pretend that everything was normal, to go about our daily lives. But the feeling persisted. It was a gnawing sense of dread that we couldn't shake.
It started with footprints. Fresh, crisp footprints in the newly fallen snow. Fresh tracks in the snow, leading from the dense forest to the farm. Leading from the forest to the farm, but none leading back. It was as if someone had appeared out of nowhere and vanished into thin air.
We were puzzled, confused, and a bit scared. Who would come to our isolated home? We lived far from the village and visitors were rare. And why didn't they leave? The tracks just stopped.
Andreas searched the property. He combed every inch of the farm, looking for any clues, but he found nothing. The incident left them uneasy, on edge. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong.
Then came the sounds. Footsteps in the attic, soft but unmistakable, creaking floorboards above our heads. It was as if someone was walking around up there. But when I investigated, I found no one, nothing out of place. Just the same old attic. Just empty space and settling dust. It was eerie.
The family began to wonder. Were they imagining things? Or was there something more sinister at play? Or was someone watching them, waiting, lurking in the shadows, unseen but felt?
I arrived at the farm as the new maid. I had heard the stories but didn't believe them. But I lasted one day, just one. The atmosphere was oppressive and I felt eyes on me constantly. I fled in terror, claiming the house was haunted. That I heard voices, felt eyes upon me. It was too much to bear.
The Grubers dismissed her fears. They thought she was just another superstitious maid, but doubt had taken root. The seeds of fear had been planted, and they began to grow. Days passed, the Grubers vanished. No one saw them in town. Their farm stood silent, eerily so. Neighbors grew concerned. Something was wrong. They could feel it in their bones.
A search party was formed. We approached the farm with trepidation, hearts pounding, breath shallow.
The farm was still, too still. No sounds of life, no movement, just an oppressive silence. The searchers called out. No answer came. They moved closer, dread building with each step. The barn door creaked open, and their worst fears were realized. Bodies brutally murdered, stacked like cordwood. The sight was horrific, stomach-turning.
Little Joseph, only 2 years old. His sister, 7-year-old Cäzilia. Their mother, Viktoria.
Investigators swarmed the farm. They arrived in droves, their faces set with determination and a hint of dread, like ants on spilled sugar. They combed every inch, searching for clues, for answers. Every blade of grass, every speck of dirt was scrutinized. But the killer had been meticulous, careful. Every move calculated, every trace meticulously erased. The crime scene yielded few secrets. It was a puzzle with missing pieces, a riddle wrapped in an enigma. It was as if a ghost had committed the murders, leaving no trace behind. The air was thick with an eerie silence, as if the land itself was mourning. The murder weapon was found, a mattock, a tool of the earth, now a harbinger of death. A farm tool turned deadly, its sharp edge glinting ominously in the sunlight. It lay where the killer had left it, abandoned, yet screaming of the violence it had witnessed. Covered in blood and hair, evidence of a brutal struggle, a life taken too soon, a grim testament to the violence that had occurred. The investigators bagged it, their gloves stained with the remnants of the crime, hoping it would lead them to the murderer, a single thread in a tapestry of horror. But it would prove to be a dead end, another frustrating twist in an already convoluted case. Time of death was established, Friday night, March 31st, 1922. The clock had stopped for the victims, but the investigation was just beginning. But the bodies weren't discovered until April 4th. 4 days of silence, 4 days of decay, 4 days, 4 long days, each moment ticking by, the trail growing colder, during which the farm had continued to function. Life went on, oblivious to the horror that had unfolded in its midst. The house told a story, a chilling one, of an uninvited guest, someone who had made themselves at home, in a home that wasn't theirs. The evidence was subtle but unmistakable, a picture of invasion, of violation. Food was missing from the kitchen. Not much, just enough to sustain one person for a few days. The killer had helped themselves, casual, as if they belonged there, as if the house was theirs now. The thought made the investigators' skin crawl. Beds had been slept in, sheets rumpled, pillows indented, but not the family's beds. No, these were the spare beds, in the attic, where the footsteps had been heard. Days passed after the murders. The farm didn't fall silent. It lived on, a grotesque parody of normalcy. The killer remained, walking the halls, using the rooms, as if they owned the place, as if the Grubers had never existed. Neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney. Days after the murders, someone was there keeping the fire going, cooking meals, living a life that wasn't theirs to live. The thought was nauseating, terrifying. Who could be so cold, so detached? The animals were cared for. Cows milked, chickens fed. The killer played farmer. The list of suspects grew, then shrank, then grew again. Everyone was under scrutiny. No one was above suspicion. The investigators chased leads, interviewed witnesses, followed hunches, but each path led to a dead end. The killer remained elusive, a shadow just out of reach. Former maid Crescensriga was questioned. She had worked at the farm, left under mysterious circumstances, but her alibi was solid, unshakable. She was crossed off the list. Another dead end, another hope dashed. Victoria's husband was considered, Carl Gabriel, presumed dead in the war, but what if he had returned, seeking revenge? It was a tantalizing theory. Fear gripped the community. Doors were locked, windows shuttered. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. The killer could be anyone, could be anywhere. Trust evaporated like morning dew, replaced by paranoia, by dread. Children were kept close, no more playing in the fields, no more carefree days. Parents whispered warnings, be careful, be watchful. The innocence of rural life was shattered, like a mirror dropped on hard stone. The pieces could never be put back together. The farm stood empty, a silent monument to tragedy. No one would live there, no one could bear to. It became a place of ghost stories, of dares and whispered legends. As time passed, theories multiplied, like weeds in an untended garden, each more outlandish than the last. Some said it was a robbery gone wrong, others a crime of passion. A few whispered of supernatural forces, of demons and curses. The truth remained elusive, hidden behind a veil of time and mystery. Amateur sleuths pored over the case, examining every detail, every inconsistency. They debated online, in books, at conferences. The Hinterkaifeck Murders became an obsession for those who sought to solve the unsolved, to unveil the truth hidden in the shadows. One theory gained traction, that the killer was known to the family, someone they trusted. How else could they have stayed so long, undetected, unsuspected? It was a chilling thought, that the murderer might have been a friend. Nearly a century has passed since that fateful night in 1922. Yet the Hinterkaifeck murders still captivate, still perplex, still send shivers down spines. The case refuses to fade into history. It lingers, like a ghost unwilling to pass on, demanding answers, seeking justice. Books have been written, films made, podcasts recorded, all trying to make sense of the senseless, to find reason in the unreasonable. But the truth remains hidden, buried with the victims, lost in the mists of time. The Hinterkaifeck murders stand as a testament to the limits of human understanding, to the darkness that can lurk in the human heart. For those who study true crime, who seek to understand the incomprehensible, Hinterkaifeck is a holy grail, a case that defies solution.